Namaste and welcome everyone to episode number 75. I can't believe that I am at 75. I had some echoes. Sorry about that. That's fixed now. So cool. Episode number 75. Finally, when I started a few years ago, just before the pandemic, I thought maybe 10 episodes would be nice if we are, because the raging number or the statistic at that time for everyone was that most podcasts, 90% plus podcasts, die at about 10 or 11 episodes. So I've done 7 times better than that, right? So well done, Anshuman. The I'm just doing a quick check as well on the feed is live on LinkedIn and YouTube both. So thank you, both technologies that you've not failed me today. Some gratitude as we start the show. Now, of course, during the journey to 75 episodes, I've been very, very lucky and have had the honor of hosting two Thinkers 50 members. Right. Thinkers 50 is the top thinkers club, or you can say group of the world. And Oleg Konovlov and Dr. Subir Chaudhary, who are members of Thinkers 50 for some time, have been on the show. I've had a world famous comedian, Papa CJ, on the show. One of LinkedIn's original OG influencers, Abhijit Bhaduri, on the show. My own mentor, Mr. Suresh Lula, a former monk, Pandit Dasa. Over 20 leading quality professionals in my quality series, which I did for Kimpro Foundation, and speakers on communication, confidence, soft skills, career, and many more. So it's been a very, very good run, and I can't express my gratitude in any better way than just to say thank you. Right? And of course, my audience who's been around throughout the whole episode series and encouraged me. This started as a recorded show for 4 or 5 episodes, and then I moved to live. Some lives, of course, have been across the week, but mostly on Saturdays. Right. So I guess I'm looking forward to hundreds now. But that brings me to the topic of the day: motivation for self growth. Right. You can see that I'm fairly motivated about this whole thing. That reaching to 75 and looking forward to 100. And I could not find a better speaker on motivational topics than Krish Dhanam, whom I'll bring on to the feed in a minute. But a little word about Krish in brief. As all of us are aware of Zig Ziglar, right? So Zig Ziglar literally created the motivational speaking industry, along with maybe Jim Rohn and Brian Tracy and a couple of others. But he is the OG of uh, the whole motivational speaking industry. Of course, no more with us. In his lifetime, he personally mentored only two executive coaches. One of them is Krish Dhanam today. Krish has successfully delivered this message of hope, humor, and balance over in about 75 countries in 6 continents. So I guess when he comes on, we'll ask him which continent did he leave out. My guess is Antarctica, but you never know with Krish, right? So and I'm able to read all this or share all this only because he's not on the screen. If he were there, I would get nervous. So I've kept him in the green room. As a curriculum designer, he has authored programs on staff development, sales, leadership, personal development, and communication. And as an author, he has authored and co-authored 6 books, and of course, contributed to many more. One day, when I write my book, maybe I'll ask him to write a page somewhere. His client list is, of course, the who's who of global enterprise, and he's received accolades across the world. Very famous, very difficult to get. I am still not sure how he said yes to my. Maybe he misunderstood for me for somebody else. We'll ask him that. So very special is that as a volunteer, he started communication programs in the prisons of America and has equipped frontline shepherds in Eastern Europe and Sub-Saharan Africa. So man of many talents, and the Dhanams have made home in Flower Mound, Texas. So I present to you now Krish Dhanam. You, I have unmuted you. Welcome to the show. Namaste. And so glad that you could say yes and are able to share your message with a larger audience. Many of us are your fans, and really pleased that you could accept to be on the show. Any opening comments, sir?
Well, as you were introducing me, I kind of pinched myself. I grew up in Vishakhapatnam, India, looking at the ships leaving the harbor, wondering if any of them had my story. And when you talk about managing better, it's not where you start, it's where you finish that matters. But more importantly, the words of Karl Barth came to mind. None of us can go back and make a brand new beginning, but all of us can start now and make a fantastic ending.
There you go. And speaking of ships, you will see a ship artifact behind me. This is hand woven from Indonesia. So, their ancient ships were like this, apparently. So fantastic. I will just do a quick check, Krish, if you don't mind, on both the feeds. Um, yes, we have people on the show on both the platforms. So fantastic. Now, the the reason I wanted to do this show, Krish, of course, one was that my selfish motive to speak to you, but more importantly, also that there is this buzz going around, particularly with influencers on LinkedIn, including sometimes myself, who say that motivation is overhyped. We don't need motivation on a regular basis, and we actually need a system and a process, right? I have always believed, and I needed your views on this. I have always believed that in a long journey, literally every day you are starting a fresh journey, right? So a long journey is basically short journeys, put together into one. So each start needs some motivation. So that's my take on motivation, and that's how I describe when I get a chance. But I thought, let me speak to the expert on this. So what are your opening views on this kind of a topic?
Well, I read with interest your article yesterday. I think you attached it to your LinkedIn profile, and you had some interesting assumptions there. But here are some things that I'll augment off that, just complement and supplement what you already wrote. Motivation gets you going, but habit gets you there. You make motivation a habit, you'll get there quicker and have more fun along the way. Motivation is a motive for action if you parse the word. The question is, whose motive is it? If you're motivating people so you'd look good, that's manipulation. If you're motivating people so they'll look good, that's motivation. And ultimately, I call myself the gratitude architect because you need motivation every day. But like everything in life, as you correctly pointed out, motivation has a starting block, has a finishing stop, and has a timing clock. You need it all going all the time. So I believe that yesterday ends with last night, and today is the first day of the rest of your life. So, um, you know, they say that you don't need motivation every day, but you do. The reason we bathe every day is because the negative grime of the world gets on us, the same way you need to be motivated every day to get the negativity of yesterday out. So,
Fantastic. So, and I have, of course, heard you earlier, so I kind of knew your response, but that kind of affirms the whole point that we need a balance of both. Unless we are motivated, we don't start.
mhm.
Unless we have a habit or discipline, we don't get going, right? So, and there is a very, I would say a cycle that has to follow, right? So, really well said. Somebody has already liked your comment around Karl Marx.
Well, it was Karl Barth, not Karl Marx. I try not
Karl
to
Barth.
quote
So
Marx.
Aniket,
I try not to quote Marx. I'm a capitalist.
yeah. So Aniket, we'll correct this in the recording,
Sure.
but fantastic. So I of course wanted to start with this question around motivation and discipline, Krish, but I'm also very interested in your journey with Zig Ziglar because that would have been quite a ride.
Mhm.
Having seen, we've only seen his videos and a few videos and books and audio wherever we could land, and what a man. So anything, anything on how you landed under his, you can say, mentorship, and how was the journey? Anything that you want to share with our audience as a package or a capsule for us?
Yeah, just if you go back in life, one of the principles that he taught me was every great teacher is looking for a great student. Become a great student to a great teacher, and you'll find your mentor. They don't always have to be famous. They can be someone at the corner store. Because the premise is this: in the world we live in, knowledge is learned, but wisdom is lived. Unfortunately, we pursue knowledge, which just becomes academic, instead of pursuing wisdom, which becomes practical. I went to hear Mr. Ziglar speak when I won a sales contest for another company. The winning prize was a ticket to a Zig Ziglar seminar. In those
Mhm.
3 hours, he did more for me than my entire management education did. And I made a decision to go work for him. 2 years later, I got a job with him as a telemarketer. And to make the long story rather palatable, very quickly, I got his eye for one reason and one reason only: I was willing to serve. And the willingness to serve began with taking his shoes to be shined when nobody knew who I was. And at the end, when he had Alzheimer's, I was the only one he let take him to the bathroom because he forgot who he was. We truly had a very symbiotic relationship of a father and a son. But servant leadership, I mean, I've always practiced the principle that when you serve others, bow so low that you don't see their face, just their feet. But when they look over your bent frame, they see the goodness that sent you. So he saw character, he saw loyalty, he saw discipline about my Indian upbringing. And when I brought him to India in 2005, he capsulized with these words. He told the people in India, "You sent me a boy who was scared. I bring you back a man who is my legacy."
Mm, this was some story, and of course, the professional side of it. I'm sure this you while you might have shared this many times in your career, Krish, but each time there might be a lump in the throat.
Yep.
I had one. So the and I've had a mentor like this, Mr. Suresh Lula, who's quality guru for many across the world, and at least for me, definitely. So I know the feeling in a different way, and it's a very special feeling to have. And he was a student of J.M. Juran, who's known as the founding father of modern quality.
Okay.
So in a way, those blessings travel, and as you said, in the Indian tradition, the blessings travel if you serve. Fantastic. So the needless to say that the Ziegler impact or contribution then as you worked upon your journey, and tell us a little bit about how your journey as a motivational speaker then unfolded. Of course, we know where it started. You
Sure.
just shared with us, but how did it unfold a little bit?
Yeah, I got his eye. I used my business degree to write a proposal to the company. People always wonder how did it happen, and it actually happened very practically, as you pointed out. Motivation has two sides to it. One is the will to participate, and the other is the skill to allow that will to make a living. So you
Hmm.
need both. I mean, you can only be happy so long. You still have to feed your family and not just your ego. So one of the things that happened was I wrote a company a proposal saying, "Hey, the job that travels with him only does 2 days a week. Why can't I do both jobs, but pay me only for one job? If I fail at the job you hired me to, fire me from both." And I that gave me the position. They eliminated the position of the person who was traveling with him and gave me that position because I provided value to the company, two jobs for the price of one. And as a result, I started traveling him with the idea that if I was with him, I would be with presidents of companies. So I would hit my sales quota without having to dial the phone a lot. And there was a tactical reason behind it. But traveling with him required me to make sure that I truly served him. If you remember, Anshuman, you pointed out that Mr. Ziegler's famous quote was, "You can have everything in life you want if you just help enough other people get what they want." And that has to be a philosophy. It cannot be a tactic. You have to do because it's the right thing, not because you're going to get something out of it. But about 6 months later, he said, "This boy is too valuable to me on the road. He actually understands what I need, but does it from behind the scenes. But as he's with me, he also monetizes his presence by captivating the people around him." Through that, he asked me if I wanted to learn how to do what I was doing and what he was doing so I could be his international ambassador. And within about a year later, I was promoted to director of international operations very shortly after I became vice president of global ops and installed his licenses all over the world. But the desire to learn how to speak was watching him do good to people because it was the right thing to do, and the desire to continue to do it was the feedback we were getting from people whose lives were being changed. My greatest joy today when I do things like this is the emails I get from people I impacted 15 years ago. You yourself made my day when you said that you heard me speak when my dear friend Mohan brought me to Hyderabad or to HSBC, or
Yeah.
whatever. I think it was HSBC at that time.
HSBC, yeah.
So
So
yeah, I want to
yeah.
make sure that I give you your chance to ask your questions. I'm a speaker. You need to make me.
No, no, we would love, we would love, we are very conscious. Many of my friends said that, how did you land Krish Dhanam on your show? So I said, I paid him 1 million. Uh, which we'll settle later in some other way. But yes, and this is probably, I'm glad you pointed out how we met each other for the first time. And you probably may not remember because I was in the audience and you were the key speaker. So obviously the dynamics are different. But this is also the power of networking, Krish, that I stayed in touch. And I didn't know that I will be doing a series. I didn't know that I would consider you as a guest and honored to have you on the show. But this is the power of networking. You don't work with an end in mind always, and you have certain joy in reaching out to people, speaking to them, having some interaction, and then someday something else happens through that. So glad that I stayed in touch, and today can happen. Which brings me to a point, and you may want to skip this question, but this morning when I messaged you as a quick reminder for the time, you said you were in the office writing some morning devotions. Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, you obviously don't have to reveal the devotions that you were writing,
The
but why and what?
Yeah, the habit, again, going back to the words you used in Manage Better about motivation and discipline, skill and will. I've had a habit for 30 years, believe it or not, Anshuman, where I wake up every morning without fail between 4 and 4:30. I write for a half hour something that is of impact to other people, and I read for a half hour something that's of impact to me. Because I own my own company and maintain my own schedule, I may go back to sleep at 6, but when I wake up at 7, I'm waking up with input that I just put in an hour earlier. And most people are waking up with input they put in the previous night. It's not even a fair fight. I'm already ahead of the game. And that's the reason I do it. Without error, I have read at least one book on average a week now for the last 33 years. So these disciplines keep me going. Like I said, motivation gets you going, but habit keeps you going, and habit gets you there. So I write a devotion. It's a spiritual devotion, but then again, I have a very tactical approach. I don't send it to the same people every day. I pick
Hmm.
15 or 20 people and I go through my Rolodex, because you use the word networking. Every week, I send something to someone at least twice or thrice a week, to just 5 or 7 people, and I just keep going through my entire phone. And you'll never know who's hurting that day who will call back and said, "Hey, thanks for that. I needed that inspiration. I needed that quote, or I needed that poem." The world is filled with pain and angst, and part of being grateful is lift somebody else up, and you'll forget your problems at least momentarily. So,
That's such a deep and wonderful thought and I'm already thinking that you've been doing this for 30 years. Most of us are struggling to keep a habit for 30 days, and we can't even call it a habit because it's not even there for 30 days.
so
But
yes, I mean,
the
just without interrupting, I got to the office this morning at 5 because I knew at 7:30 I wanted to be with you. So I needed to finish what I need to get my day going, and then prep so that I make sure I'm ready for what you need me to do, because I'm not here because I'm maybe here because I'm my reputation, but everybody on the show is here because of your reputation, and I owe you that preparation.
Thank you very much. No, everybody on the show is also because of your reputation, that I can confirm. But I get your point. I mean, obviously, when anybody, and this is one mark of all great speakers that I've seen, and I've worked with a few or seen a few in action. Uh, I always see that they are early. Always, I joined the show 15 minutes early, and you were already there. So that is important. And they always prepare and make sure that the show is gets what it ought to, where it was going. So that is That's really special, and thank you. And maybe apologies for waking you up early today, but but I want to pack it in the evening so that it's a little comfortable for you. The
Sure, sure.
morning show that I do is 11 a.m. That would be very difficult for anybody to.
I'm doing one Monday night with a college from India where I'll
Uh,
come here to the studio at 11 at night because it's students. I
yeah.
mean, Saturday I ask for your permit, but Saturday I usually wake up early as well. Every day I go for a 5 mile walk. Saturday and Sunday I do 7 miles.
You are dropping lessons without us asking for. So I hope the audience, and of course, this show is recorded also, Krish. So it will be available on the same links. And this is also for some people have asked in the audience. And I want to remind everybody that don't worry. If you're in and out of the show, this is live as well as recorded. So same recording will be available on the same links even later. And you can keep it and watch it later or share amongst your friends as you may like. Right. Okay. So we will get into a little bit slightly corporate questions, and the show format, of course, Krish, is that I usually dissect a topic into why, what, and how.
Sure.
So the why part we've covered a little bit, that why motivation is important. The what part we will soon get into, and time permitting, we'll get a little bit into how, which is the you can say the nitty gritties. Usually, I leave out the how because that is very personal. People have their own ways of it, and this I've had speakers on confidence and public speaking and other topics, but the fundamentals are the same. You have a why, you have a what, and then you break it down into a how. So, and in the corporate world, as we work, and most of us on the show are people who are working in some company or the other, or even if they are working for themselves, it usually starts with how do I motivate myself at work. So that would be my first question, and then I will move on to how do I motivate my team.
Sure.
So you can take my example or any other example that comes to mind, that I'm a mid-career professional. Every mid-career professional has their own challenges of stagnation, of inertia, or lack of growth, or maybe politics, maybe other issues. But how do they keep themselves motivated? What would be your capsule for them?
Yeah, and I think glancing over at the chat, two of the questions we can probably pull into this, both
Sure.
the high tips for motivation and serving others. You used a word networking that has kept us in touch over the years. My formula for daily motivation is an acrostic called WIN, WIN. The W stands for wisdom. Always remember that no matter what problem you're going through, someone has already gone through it. And make sure you understand that there's not one person in any gathering that is smarter than all of them put together. So glean from the wisdom of others. The greatest tip for self motivation is when you practice wisdom, you learn the art of unlearning that which you thought worked that didn't, and learning things that will work. So, wisdom. Second is innovation. So, if wisdom is the need of the day, innovation is the need of the hour. We're going through more change now than at any other time in human history. And as a result of that, Eric Hoffer said, in times of change, it is the learners who will inherit the earth, while the learned will find themselves beautifully equipped for a world that no longer exists. So, innovation requires new knowledge, new skills. And I use a transportation example in innovation. Never sit anywhere. Don't sit there to get there. Sit there to arrive more informed. Your competition is getting keener, are you? So, wisdom, innovation. And the third is the word you use, networking, WIN. Practice wisdom. Knowledge is learned, wisdom is lived. Innovation is the need of the hour. Networking is the need of the minute. If you practice those three on a regular basis every single day, try to seek out new opportunities that will allow that formula to exist, you'll find yourself motivated. It's just like when you buy a green car, suddenly you notice a lot of green cars around. If you come early, you'll suddenly realize everybody does. It's just the nature of the world. And then the last component is understanding that primary principle which was asked, is service to others important? The only way, Carl Menninger from the Menninger Clinic in Topeka, Kansas, put it this way: when you feel the weight of the world on your shoulders and you feel a nervous breakdown coming on, find someone with a bigger problem than yours and try to get involved in solving theirs, and you may forget yours.
Yes, really deep. I have no words. Usually in my shows, Krish, I speak for about 15-20%. But today I think that percent will be more like 1 or 2%. But I'm glad I can do that because the world needs people like you, and I'm happy that I'm able to bring through our association to my audience. So that was a little bit about how do we keep ourselves motivated, particularly in a work setting, right? And you correctly pointed out a formula as well, Win. And if we extend this, none of us get anything done on our own. So we need a team. Even if I keep saying that, even if we are individual contributors or even if we are solopreneurs, we always have a team. Somebody gets something done for us, and that's extremely important. So we have a team. How do we keep our team sometimes motivated? What happens, of course, in a long journey is that we might remain motivated, or we might have our ups and downs, which and our downs may be even upper than the other people's up.
Sure.
So that also happens, but we do find that the team sometimes gets deflated. And what do you do in, or if you were consulting them, what would you do to pull them up?
Well, I'll use an analogy that I got from one of my co authors who ran a small company you might have heard of called Microsoft. But Rick Beluso and I wrote a book called Hard Headed, Soft Hearted. And I was on the speaking circuit with him for many years. We spoke to thousands of people and trained that concept all over the world. That book, we outlined exactly what you're talking about. In in today's team building environment, to be a motivational leader while still being practical, you cannot use the old approach of either or, which is my way or the highway. Or you can't use the approach of I'm just going to completely serve others. You need both. So when Rick was at Hewlett Packard, he talked to Dave Packard and said, how do you effectively lead a team when some people are more qualified than you, some people are less qualified than you, but the goal is to get everybody to the finish line? And Dave Packard gave him that word, hard headed, soft hearted. He says, you have to be hard headed, results rule, but you have to be soft hearted, people matter. So what
Hmm.
happens is you have to understand the principle that nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care about them. So, by the same token, you can't just be motivational and thinking in the great by and by it'll work out because you're doing them a disservice. So, my hard headed rules are threefold. I always tell my team the same thing. I say, hey, I'm going to train you to make you successful. Second, I'm going to give you another chance. If you're not effective at what you're going to do, I'm going to transfer someone to assist you or transfer you to some other team. And the third T is terminate. Train, transfer, terminate, because no organization can support that ineptitude just because you want to be nice. So that's the hard-headed. Here's the soft-hearted. The soft-hearted comes from Bob Townsend, who wrote a book called Up the Down Organization. Bob Townsend came from American Express and turned Avis around into a people-owned
Yeah.
company. Bob Townsend, any group he led, he asked the same three questions at the individual level and at the group level. What do you do? This is role identity. What would you like to do? Role destiny. How will you know when you get there? Role benchmark. And the next day, when they came back with the answers, that's how he knew what he had to work with. But day one, he asked the three questions. What do you do? What would you like to do? How will you know when you get there? Those three answers gave him the ability to customize motivation for them. Because while you can do reward and recognition en masse, motivation with just reward doesn't work because everybody is motivated by different rewards. Motivation just by incentive doesn't work. So the three kinds of motivation that work for a team that came from Mr. Ziglar are FIG. Some will be motivated by fear, some by incentive, and some by growth. You need to figure out what works.
So you dropped so many bombs, Krish. I feel like a World War II field, but but the one I certainly take is Bob Townsend's three questions. Fantastic question, and many of us have read that book, but maybe the questions didn't stay the ways you explained. So I'm glad that you did a revision for us, and of course the fear incentive and growth, right? And this is very true, and I've run teams, and I still have a full-time day job, and I do see that I've always known, and I'm sure many people who have large teams always know that not everybody that not everybody has the same need for motivation, or the same thing can motivate everybody in the same way, right? So but we don't really associate FIG, like, the fear incentive and growth, and that will stay with me for a long, long time. In the context of motivating a team, we
Right.
can self motivate, that is a different concept. But when you talk to yourself, it is different from when you talk to others. So I'm really glad, and quite a few people have. We'll just take some audience comments, not questions. So Sukrit, thank you. You all pushed me to bring such fantastic guests, and today was a special one for me as well because it's 75th show. So don't ask for a similar guest till 100th. So,
76th year of independence, so I'm catching up.
and there is another person. Uh, okay, so Aniket, who was earlier as well, as is going to rewatch this show. Aniket, fantastic! Thank you very much. Uh, quite a few, quite a few people. But let's move on with the questions. And I particularly wanted to, and as part of the research for the show, Krish, and knowing you a little bit through, uh, the conversations or the exchanges we've had, you are quite actively involved in something in Vizag where you are trying to bring up some, or establish a finishing school for
Sure.
students, right? So tell us a little bit more about that, because this sounds very interesting. Finishing school for people whom we assume they are already finished products. So what is it, and why, how, when, what, where, that kind of.
Well,
So
the genesis is my own journey. When I finished my business school, I got a job as a management trainee for Novopan in Hyderabad, carrying particle board samples to BHEL on a scooter. And I remember those days of struggle. And the reason was I was academically qualified. I was practically, theoretically brilliant, but I was practically a zero. When I met Mr. Ziglar and found out that there's a practical side to success that actually pivots off the theoretical and the academic, I began to travel back to India. I made many, many trips there. And over the years, I was realizing that the quality of candidates we produce are theoretically brilliant. They know everything they need to do to pass the test. But their social skills were requiring a lot of effort. And many people were asking me to train on that. Well, you can only train on that if they also have the cultural relevance of other things. So even though they may want the motivation, the culture was beating them down. So I have some friends in Vizag over the years, and they've been asking me to do something. And one of my friends started a new organization. It's another brand new management institution in Vizag called CMT, the Center for Management and Technology. It's one of those AICTE accredited, which means he'll have the students because there's a need for an academic aperture. But what I suggested to him was after they graduate, and he has a bunch of other institutions as well, engineering as well. Those were the two categories I picked. Medicine is different, they have a different charter, but typically engineers and management guys gravitate towards the same kind of corporate environments where they have a need to be known. So there are only two kinds of people when you enter a room. One is a here I am, I'm going to take over, I'm a maverick. And the other is a there you are, a Mother Teresa kind of person. So what I wanted to do was create a 5-day finishing school where people can come for either one day or all 5 after they graduate. Some of it may be rolled into their tuition. Some of it will be a corporate opportunity. But day 1 is sales. Day 2 is presentation skills. Day 3 is staff development. Day 4 is leadership. And day 5 is transformation and strategy and service. So anyhow, that was the genesis we put together. We've hired some local trainers to walk with us. These are all independents who just want to be affiliated with my brand. But we've already run some introductory classes in Vizag, and that's the plan. From there, we'll branch out around the country. That's the goal.
Awesome. I mean, we've all seen this, but never saw the missing link. And so glad that you saw the missing link and not just saw it, but you were doing something about it. And with your experience and also the network, you are uniquely placed, Chris, to solve this. So more power to you on that. And the comments keep coming in. I just wanted to remind the audience at this point that we will be taking questions. We, as in Chris, will be taking questions. I will be relaying the questions to him. So if you have questions, couple of questions we have already taken from Tarun. So other people who have questions or wanted Chris to answer their questions, please go ahead now. I will be selecting based on how they fit the show. So go ahead. Please be brief so that we can fit it on the screen. Right. So thank you very much. I'll look forward to your questions. And of course, the way to ask a question, those who are unfamiliar or new to the format, if you are in LinkedIn, just comment. And if you are on YouTube, there also you can comment and I will be able to pick them up. So returning back to the questions, Krish, I wanted to ask one particular question certainly to you is that like every subject, motivation and the associated topics must have also undergone some change in the last 25 odd years. And you've been around the entire time and thrived in that space. Um, Globally traveled 75, 76 countries. By the way, which is the continent that you missed
Well,
out? Antarctica.
you get it. You guessed it correct. It was Antarctica, and that's still a goal. I had a privilege to go there, but then I had another small commitment I kept. I mean, I had a friend actually buy me a passage to Antarctica, which was expensive as a gift. But because I made a commitment to a small group in Indiana, I said I would be a hypocrite if I didn't honor the word commitment and just take something better that came along. So
No.
I gave it up and went to the and honored my commitment. That way, I tell people I've lost a lot of friends because of my habits, but never any sleep.
No, so one day we'll wish that you go to Antarctica and you find an audience there as well.
Well,
But coming back to this question that I wanted to ask is about how have the concepts and motivation about motivation changed in the last 25 or so years, or if you have a longer time frame, what has changed or nothing has changed?
yeah, the things that have stayed the same are the what I call the source, the course, and the force. I like to use anecdotal stuff that people will remember. So the one thing that has stayed the same as motivation is always choose people who can guide you and mentor you, who actually practice what they preach. That's the source, which means you don't ever want to get diet advice from a fat doctor. He's not following his own advice. So you want to make sure that you're listening to the skinny guy who's giving you health advice, not some fat guy sitting under a tree somewhere who doesn't practice what he preaches. So make sure your sources are consistent. Make sure that it transforms you. And for motivation to work, you have to internalize that which you think works for you, personalize it so it does work for you, so you can then vocalize it as it works for you. So the source,
Hmm.
the course, and the force. That's never changed in motivation. What has changed in motivation is the sources are many more than in the old days when you just needed one teacher and his entire arsenal. So now you have to go through the app model. If you notice the digitality of apps, every app after 3 clicks ceases to be useless to you, becomes useless to you because it now requires you to pay something. The first 3 clicks are free. Same way with motivation. There's enough of it out there, but you have to find what works for you in 3 clicks. So you need more sources. As a result, the course changes. But remember this: I'm not a scientific guy, but my entire family is. My son's an engineer, dad, mom, brother, all of that. The one word that I learned from the scientific community is the word catalyst that I think works very well in the soft
Yeah.
skill space. Every time you learn something new, become an objective catalyst, which means allow it to facilitate a reaction while staying objective to the process. The first component is change, make sure you have multiple sources. The second component is don't change with every source, change the behavior because of that source, still be an authentic you. So those two things have changed, the way you adapt to motivation and the different. The outcome of motivation is still the same because our goals and dreams are still the same. We want to leave the world a better place, leave our families more equipped. And the only advice I'll give to people who are younger, who are on this show, who have a desire to make a lot of money, is please do so. But remember this, if you're just making money so you can leave an inheritance to those that come after you, remember this about inheritance: those that get it are really glad you're dead. You'd be better off leaving a legacy, which means work on leaving a good name, because that is worth more than silver and gold. So
My younger son is around the corner where where I hope
waiting,
he's
waiting for his
listening.
estate.
So I want to tell him I have nothing, I have no house, I have no money to give to him, and he may be better off. But I get your point. I just, of course, responding in jest, Krish,
Sure.
but really well said that leaving a legacy should be what we have earned. And I've had some, you know, nice personal encounters over a period, and everybody has their, grandfathers or people in their generation. And I've had one encounter a few years ago where my maternal grandfather in Uttar Pradesh, he's long gone. And we were passing after many years. We went to the hometown and we were passing a shop and happened to check something, and I just uttered the name, and the entire shop was around to treat me, and they don't even know me, but
Uh-huh.
because of that legacy. So that's the legacy that some people leave, and I get your point.
Yeah.
So let's take a few more questions, Chris, if you
Sure.
permit. One is from a good friend, Anand Veshampayan. So he's asking, having journeyed from India to the global stage, you witnessed the myriad of cultural nuances, and how has understanding these cultural differences shaped your approach to motivation? A very good question.
Yeah.
Um, and
Uh,
you did mention
sure.
Mr. Ziegler actually uh, making that India connection, and that kind of helped you stand out. Anything for Anand in
Sure.
response to the
Uh,
question?
yeah, Anand, thank you for that question. I'm what you would call a boundary basher because I've always practiced this principle that there are some traditions that are noble: honor, respect, dignity, discipline, loyalty. These are noble traditions. Keep them. There are some traditions that don't work and don't have any answers that we've just had. So I tell people, if culture is your only strategy, tradition becomes your only formula. So understand culture as it pertains to the global stage. There, you have to look for the similarity you have with the world, not the uniqueness you bring to the world. Because if you want to integrate, you need to do so without the desire to irritate. so so sometimes we have a holier than thou attitude because of tradition. Anshuman mentioned UP. I married a girl from UP, and in the North India, there are two things, log kya kahenge and parampara. We have these two. Log kya kahenge, kaun hai ye log? 30 saal se dhoond raha hu, mile hi nahi. Log don't care about you, don't worry about log. All right, so that understand this. Tradition is good, the noble traditions, respect. I respected my father and mother, elders. Mr. Ziegler saw that in me because it's a missing trait in the Western world. I always call him Mr. Ziegler, reverence. These are noble traditions which people will notice when you travel to East Asia, when you travel to Sub Saharan Africa. People will realize there's something unique about you because you maintain the traditions that matter. I'll tell you a tradition I broke. I always walked behind Mr. Ziegler because that was my tradition. He was the great guru and I was his shishya. So I was walking two steps behind him. He looked at me and he always said, son, how come I have to look for you when I need you? I said, sir, my tradition and culture doesn't allow me to walk beside you. He said, figure it out. So I played it in my head. And think about it, Anand. There are only three places you can possibly be on planet Earth when you're walking next to a star: either next to him, which I couldn't do; behind him, which he didn't want me to do; the third was be in front of him, which no tradition objected to. So I stood in front of him and took him all over the world.
Fantastic story. So thank you, Anand, for your question, and I hope you enjoyed the response. I did. Uh, so, Chris, you mentioned something about books, and I have Aniket. Aniket is a book reading coach in his spare time, so he helps people read books. So, no surprise that his question is about books.
Sure.
So, he's asking about that you read a book a week. So questions around it. So what good practices you follow when it comes to reading? And of course, he has more questions. What are your pet peeves when people talk about books, reading habits, and so on? And what are the three? Oh, so the last one I have for you later. So you can leave that last one.
Aniket, you've asked the question that is dearest to my heart because Charlie Tremendous Jones, who was one of the great motivational speakers of the Zig Ziglar era, said that 5 years from now you're the same person, but for the people you've met and the books you've read. So books are a passion of mine, but I was never a good student in India, unlike most of you who are all superstars and smart. I was the dumbest guy in the class. I jokingly tell people I always graduated in that half of the class that made the top half possible. So I hated learning. Found out later, I probably had ADD before it was cool. So I don't read one book a week in its entirety. If you remember my statement, I said on average. So at any given time, I'm reading about 4 or 5 different books. I may read a little bit of fiction, a little bit of astrology, a little bit of anthropology, because I want to be aware, but that keeps my interest. So my habits, at any given time, I'm reading 4 or 5 books. But how do I keep it is your second question. What are my habits that allow me to get the best of all of them and maintain that average? Simple rule. When I first read, I first ask myself, what is the author saying? If it's intriguing enough, I very quickly go to step 2. What is he saying to me? And then, if I like what he's saying to me, because I'm a speaker and a communicator, and you're a reading coach, I say, how would I say this to others while keeping authorial integrity? Which means I have to write it down somewhere. Someone mentioned in the comments that I quote a lot, and I can do it from memory. I do it from memory because of that habit. I extrapolate what the book is saying. I rewrite it if I'm going to say it. And if I want to keep the original intent, I write down the author's name. Now you can do all of that on the same device. So that's my habit that I've maintained. What is the author saying? What is he saying to me? How would I say it? And how would I say it? I rewrite it so that it's then internalized and personalized, which was the original principle. So hopefully that helped.
I'm sure it does, and I I really like this approach of. So I read a bit, and it's one habit, Chris, I have had now for almost, and this started during the pandemic a little bit. That I started writing down my notes a little bit and feeling that I have nowhere to go. Sitting at home, maybe a slightly additional habit will keep me sane. And after making my notes for some weeks, I said, what will the notes do in my notebook? Why can't I publish them for somebody to read? So
Sure.
that started a series which is now almost 20 months into. Every Monday I have a book summary posted on LinkedIn.
Well,
And of course, if you are posting something, you have to be responsible, so you have to read. If not in full, you have to read enough to
yeah,
write a summary. So to do justice to the author who put his life and soul into a book, you can't obviously just bluff around it. So that has improved my own reading,
very good.
and it has improved my writing as well, because I then have to translate what is in my head into some kind of a thought or a paper. So there you go, Aniket. This was one question where I could also add to what Chris said. That doesn't happen often, but there you go. One more question, maybe a couple of more we will take. And I'm mindful of the time. We are coming towards the end of the show, Chris. If you didn't realize that, but I am keeping an eye on the clock. I don't want to
Before we
take
get
more
to the last
time.
question, I'll make another offer to you, which is usually what most people prefer rather than me bloviating. Every show I've ever done, because people are intrigued by the answers, I offer the host a follow up show at some point where it's just Q and A.
Okay,
If that'll
there you
help.
go.
Yeah. So
That can help, and yeah. So we can even do that on audio, so that
sure,
it's easier for many more people to join.
Sure.
LinkedIn now has an audio format, which is a lot easier.
Yeah.
So video format, of course, is
Sure.
more needs more preparation. Okay, so thanks for that offer, Chris. But let's take this question from Jatin. He's asking about new endeavor.
I often find myself. Okay. It's a standard question, Jatin, about motivation disappearing. I think I alluded to a short answer that Anshuman had asked earlier, but think of it this way. Motivation doesn't last, but neither does bathing or eating. And we seem to do both on a regular basis so that we'll live longer and smell better. In order for motivation to last, you have to make motivation a habit. Every day, try to find two things that you can get excited about. I'll give you a quick story that actually illuminates this point. There was a lady in Dallas who was just really a bitter lady. She had very lot of anger. And she came to one of Mr. Ziglar's seminar, and he says, if you want to be motivated, learn to start doing something for other people, and your habits will change, and you learn new habits so that you can continue to do that. So every morning she would wake up and go and she was a nurse. She would give an insulin shot to a lady of Hispanic origin, a lady of Caucasian origin, and a lady of something else. So because she had that racial divide in her mind about people not, that she was somehow belittled because of who she was. And so she started giving an insulin shot every morning to people of three different persuasions. And once a month, she would draw the name of a senior citizen from a hat and pay their electric bill. Within that year, she became the number one. She was voted as one of the 1,000 points of light in the state of Texas by then Governor George Bush. And very next year, she ended up buying a home, something she'd not been able to do for 20 years. So there's something about habits that depend on helping other people that will keep you motivated because it'll bring out the good in you. And as a result of that, you'll find other ways. So next time you're in a coffee shop line, just turn around and ask the person behind you if it'd be okay if you bought their coffee. Just they may say no, but here's the principle. If you try something you've never tried before and you fall flat on your face, you break even. You don't lose. You never had it, you gave it a shot, you came up short. So,
I am going to try this one. Thank you, Jatin, for your question. So there is one common question, and of course, I think it was alluded in a couple of questions that came earlier. One, Aniket's question, I have this question, Pallavi has this question, Anand had this question. So there you go. Can you please suggest some books primarily around the motivational space, which is your forte? And
sure,
of course, if you want to go
sure.
beyond that space, fantastic. Or another way to ask this question, what are you reading these days, Krish? What is on your reading table?
Well, right now I'm actually listening to a historical book by Flavius Josephus on the antiquities of the Jews. Just
Mm.
wanted to find out about how they, as a race of people, have always survived over a period of time, regarding, in spite of the most hostilities committed against them throughout time, if you look at the Holocaust and others. I read a lot of anthropology because I want to find out why different people were motivated at different times in society while everybody had the same problems. But rather than go through an exhaustive list, I do have a list of books that I have put in the form of a PDF, along with some of my quotes and sayings. It would be easier if I just sent that PDF to Anshuman and you send him an email or some kind of communication. He forwards that to you. Then you'll have the email, the books, about 25 or 30 books on there, plus some websites I would recommend that would definitely help you. That may be easier. I update that list every year, so that list would be current because I wouldn't do justice if I just narrated. The irony of ironies is you will not find my books on there for the simple reason that conceit is a weird disease. It affects everybody except the person who has it. So,
We will add your books to the list, Chris. But since you mentioned, and thank you for doing this because and this is very generous, and this shows the go giver in you that you want to give more. So what I'll do, and this is a live show, so I'm sharing this. I will make a post out of this entire show, some of the comments, and I will attach the summary that. And Chris, I hope you don't mind that more people who could not even attend the show
absolutely.
can also get this, right? So
देखे
Of
तो
course,
नहीं जा सकते. I can't take any of this with me. नंगे आए नंगे ही जाएंगे. So
the so with that color to the episode, what we'll do is that uh, early next week I will make this post so that I'll give it just a couple of days so that I can organize my thoughts and make this post on most likely on Monday or Tuesday. So those of you who are already connected to me will obviously get some notification, but do check my profile on Monday, Tuesday. And Chris is not as active as I am on LinkedIn, but he also responds to messages there. So worst case, we will take that. But you should be able to find on by Monday a post from me, which includes the attachment that Chris just mentioned. So
they can ask me questions directly as time permits. I will answer them. If you, I don't want to. It's your show, so I don't want to give my information. But
no,
yeah,
no, you should. So why
yeah,
not?
yeah, just Krish at krishdhanam.com, just my name, Krish at krishdhanam.com. Ask me any question. I promise you, if I don't have the answer, by God's grace, I have a faculty of advisors that I've amassed over the last 30 years through networking. Someone will have the answer, and you give me a little bit of time, at least a week, I'll get back to you and make sure you have that information.
There
That's
you go. Very generous offer. So anyone who and there are quite a few questions that we could not take up during the show, Chris. So my request to them is, of course, if you have posted or if you don't get an answer, please do write to Chris. His name has spelt on the screen. You can see the same name. Or if you have any difficulty reaching out to him, reach out to me. I will share the details. Okay, one last question and then we kind of close up. But very good comment. This I wanted to share from CA Lilia Nafikova. Seems to be a fan of yours. So knowledgeable, interesting, motivating. So she's certainly been impacted. Rajita has a question which is quite interesting. So I was about to end the show, but I thought this is a question that we can take. Being a parent of teenager, self motivation is a challenge. So for you, Rajita, or for the teenager, I will assume for the teenager. So anything that you can share for younger students or teenagers?
Um, I'll do what we did with our child. He's grown now and he's employed somewhere else, but it's something I got from somebody else. It may be antithetical to what you historically think, but we are raising our children for an incentive driven world. The whole goal of educating them that they'll get a job and they'll make a mark in life is so that life will reward them in some kind of a way. So teach them reward early. Behavior that is rewarded will always be repeated, is what we say in the training world. Somehow, with teenagers, we have an expectation because they are children and we have a parental rule. So that's important. So, first step, don't try to be a buddy to your teenager. They still need authority. Make sure that you bow down to something that is higher than you. That way, you'll earn the right to have them bow down to you. Don't give them advice you don't follow. And the third thing, don't try to guilt them into gratitude by saying, we never had any of these things. You're so lucky you have it. They notice that you're living in the house that you kind of blame them for living in and enjoy the same TV you're blaming them for watching. So never guilt them into gratitude. Second, bow down to something higher than you so you learn the right to have them bow down to you. But third, remember, behavior that is repeated, rewarded will be repeated. And my friend Nido Kubain did this. I did this with my child to some degree. You may not like this advice because it's the opposite of everything we teach in India, but it works. I told my son, for every A you get, I'll give you $5. I'm raising you for a capitalistic world. I want you to be self sufficient, and I want you to realize that good behavior excellence does earn incentive. For every B you get, I'll give you $3 because we do reward effort. If you get a C, you won't get anything. There is no reward for average. If you get a D, you owe me $5. There's a penalty.
There, there you go, Rajita. I'm so glad you asked this question, and I am even more glad that I was able to sneak in that question. So thank you very much. I hope, and this truly is a fantastic end toward the show, Chris. Thank you very much. Really honored and grateful that you could do this for our audience. And we will take you up on the offer of for a repeat show in some weeks, so that people who've had the time to see or watch your show later on or have questions and so on. And you do come to India even
Yeah,
now for
I'm going to
other
be doing
events.
some events in Hyderabad and Chennai and Delhi. So for those of your audience that are scattered, because of this, I may post that on LinkedIn. Just my name, Krish Dhanam, or go to Anshuman's thing and you can connect me from there. Because there are apparently some fake profiles of mine on LinkedIn. I don't know why anybody would want to imitate me. I'm just an old guy with young hair. So I'm a young guy with old hair, whichever way you look at it. But yeah, I'm going to be doing an event in Chennai, a full day event on bridging the gap, uh, making your career your calling, and then doing something in Hyderabad. But Delhi, I think I'm speaking as well in Noida a couple of times on the 19th, which would be corporate events. So
That's next month.
yeah, so that'll be September. I'm arriving in India on the 7th of September, and I think I'll be there till the
Sure.
20th.
So there you go. Those who do want to catch Krish live in action, these are the details. Of course, do check his profile and his website for more. But once again, to my audience, thank you very much for joining on a Saturday evening, and Chris, for your Saturday morning consumed in this. But I also hope that you also enjoyed the conversation, because it's fun. It's probably routine for you, but we loved it. And I before usually when I have the next show lined up, I end up in the show with the announcement for the next speaker. So next speaker is my regular Saturday morning show, 11 a.m. next Saturday, which is 26th. I will have a industry veteran from the copywriting, and in the sense that the advertising kind of field, copywriters, Shantesh Rao. He will be speaking on better writing online. So that's a skill I wanted to bring people, because a lot of people are writing online, but we can't seem to improve. So he will be live next Saturday, which is 26th, Shantesh, on at 11 a.m. With that, I will let everybody go. Thank you very much once again. Thank you, sir. And we will be in touch. Thank you once again. Bye bye.
God bless. Bye bye.